I walked into my own retirement party and left divorced. The cake hadn't even been cut when Melissa, my wife of 28 years, handed me a manila envelope. I thought it was a card, maybe something the kids had signed. But inside were the divorce papers, already filed. No scene, no tears, just signatures. Hers and mine, already forged. My name is Richard Callahan, 61 years old. I spent 4 decades as an engineer in naval defense contracting. My hands built systems that protected lives. My silence protected a family that had been eroding right in front of me. The guests clapped, oblivious. Melissa smiled for pictures like nothing happened. My daughter Rachel looked away. My son Matt, he couldn't even make eye contact. That's when I knew. They knew. They all knew. She'd been seeing someone. For over a year, maybe more. Probably some co-worker from the law firm. Someone younger, louder, better at pretending to care. My kids had known, and none of them had the decency to warn me. I didn't say a word. Not when Melissa leaned over during the speeches and whispered, "Don't make a scene. Let's be civil." Not when Matt hugged me stiffly and muttered, "You'll land on your feet, Dad." Not when Rachel posted a photo of the cake with the caption, "New chapters all around." I smiled. I nodded. I shook hands. I thanked people for coming. And by 8:30 that night, I was gone. I didn't go home. I didn't go to a hotel. I didn't even turn on my phone. I drove west. Left Maryland behind before sunrise. Didn't pack a bag. Didn't call a soul. I withdrew $3,000 in cash from the emergency account Melissa never knew about, and I vanished. I left behind the house I'd paid for, the kids I'd put through school, the woman who wore my mother's ring. No explanations. No messages. Just gone. That night, I slept in my car at a rest stop in Kentucky. It was quiet. Cold. Honest. I kept driving. 3 weeks later, I had a job in Montana, under a different name. Nothing high profile. Warehouse night shift, cash pay, no questions. The kind of job where no one cares who you were, just whether you show up on time. I watched the snow pile up outside that concrete loading dock and thought, this is peace. For 5 years, I stayed off the radar. No social media. No bank cards. I lived small, saved quiet. Read books. Ate alone. Watched the world forget I existed. Until last February. That's when Rachel showed up at the back door of the distribution center where I worked. Her hair was soaked from the rain. Her eyes, bloodshot. She was thinner than I remembered. Her coat 2 sizes too big. "Dad," she said, "we need help." I said nothing. Just stared. Because 5 years ago, they watched me get destroyed and did nothing. Now they were here. Desperate. Humble. And I knew something they didn't. I hadn't spent 5 years hiding. I'd spent 5 years preparing. And what I did next shocked them all. Rachel stood in the rain like a stranger. She hadn't called. She hadn't written. Just appeared one night, 5 years after I vanished, with panic in her eyes and nothing but my first name on her lips. She said, "We need help." I didn't answer. Not right away. I stepped aside, let her in out of the weather. She sat on a plastic crate in the break room while the night shift manager clocked out. She looked around the warehouse like she couldn't believe I lived like this. But that was the point. I made coffee, watched her hands tremble as she held the mug. Her wedding ring was gone. Her voice was thin when she spoke again. "Matt lost his job. Melissa's sick. It's bad. Really bad." I stared at the wall, let her fill the silence. The firm Melissa worked for collapsed under a fraud investigation. She wasn't charged, but the damage was done. No income. No savings. Her new partner had left 2 years ago. And now cancer. Aggressive. Uninsured. Rachel said they tried to find me, but I'd left nothing behind. No digital trail. No accounts in my name. They only found me because Matt remembered I had a friend in Montana once. Took them 6 months and a lucky guess. She said, "We didn't know what else to do." I listened. Still didn't speak. Because 5 years ago, I was ambushed in front of 100 people, served papers at a party meant to honor my life's work. Melissa humiliated me publicly. My children watched it happen, and no one said a word. Now they wanted help. Not an apology. Not forgiveness. Help. I told Rachel I needed a few hours to think. She slept in her rental car that night. I let her. Not out of cruelty. Out of principle. At dawn, I drove into town, to the bank where I kept my savings, under the name Edward Nolan, a name I'd used on paperwork since the day I left Maryland. The account balance was just over $684,000. Hard-earned, quietly built. No debts, no strings. When I returned, Rachel was sitting outside, teeth chattering in the cold. I handed her a duffel bag. Inside, $50,000 in cash. No explanations. No promises. She looked up, shocked. I said 5 words. "You won't find me again." Then I turned and walked back into the warehouse. But that wasn't the end. It was the start of something bigger. Because as soon as Rachel left, I made a call I'd been planning for years. To a lawyer in Boise. A woman who owed me a favor. I said, "It's time." And that quiet plan I'd been building for half a decade? It was finally in motion. The call lasted under 2 minutes. No emotion. No reminiscing. Just facts. Her name was Carla Myers. Former JAG officer. Now private practice in Boise, specializing in asset shielding and legal restructuring. I'd helped her once, years ago, when a defense contract exposed her firm to unwanted attention. Quietly. No paper trail. She said, "Is this about them?" I said yes. She said, "I'll prep the documents." I spent the next 2 days in silence. No phone calls. No emails. I worked my shifts, ate my meals, slept when I could. Every hour had weight to it now. Because I wasn't just responding. I was executing. On the 3rd morning, a courier arrived at the warehouse with a plain envelope. Inside, new documents. A trust. A holding company. Power of attorney files. Carla had done her job well. I read everything twice. Signed. Notarized. Sent it back. By the time Rachel and Matt realized what I was doing, the process would be irreversible. Because they didn't just come to me for help. They came thinking I was still the man they remembered. Predictable. Soft-spoken. Passive. They didn't know I'd spent 5 years becoming something else entirely. A week after Rachel's visit, Matt emailed. I don't know how he found the address. Probably from Rachel's rental agreement. It didn't matter. The message was short. Polite. Just enough guilt to sound like remorse. He said they were grateful. That the money had helped stabilize Melissa's treatments. That he was looking for work again and wanted to make things right. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside were photos, documents, passwords, financial records, everything I'd gathered before I disappeared. I hadn't just vanished out of grief. I'd vanished with purpose. Melissa had moved fast after the divorce. She'd sold the house for half its value, transferred retirement assets while my back was turned, liquidated joint accounts. But she made a mistake. Several, actually. Some of those assets weren't fully hers. Some had my name buried deep in the structure. Especially the investment accounts I'd started back in 1998, years before our marriage. Accounts her lawyer hadn't found. I'd let it go at the time. Let them take what they thought was theirs. But now it was time to take it back. That night, I instructed Carla to begin asset reclamation proceedings under the umbrella of the new trust. Quietly, legally, with precision. By the time they saw what was happening, the paperwork would already be filed. And the money? Already moved. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. They wanted help. What they got was consequences. Melissa's lawyer called 2 weeks later. Not to ask how I was. Not to apologize. He wanted to know why the investment firm had frozen 2 of her accounts. I said nothing. Because the truth was simple. Those accounts were never hers. She'd used my name to access them after the divorce, assuming I'd never fight back. She was wrong. The lawyer sounded confused, maybe a little concerned. He said it was probably just a paperwork issue. That Melissa was in a fragile place and hoped we could resolve this quickly. I told him everything would be handled through my attorney. And then I hung up. That same afternoon, Rachel emailed again. This time, her tone was different. Edgy. She said she'd heard about the asset freeze. Asked why I was creating more stress during a time when her mother needed peace. I read it twice. No mention of what Melissa did to me. No acknowledgement that I'd lost everything in one night, including them. Just a request to stop making things difficult. So I sent them a gift. It was small. A single envelope. Inside was a photocopy of the divorce decree. Specifically, the section Melissa's lawyer had pushed through without my consent. The part that declared certain accounts were irrelevant to joint proceedings. Their wording, not mine. They didn't know I'd kept every draft, every revision, every legal note scribbled in the margins. They didn't know I'd recorded every call. Melissa's arrogance had been her downfall. She thought I'd walk away quietly, too ashamed to fight. She thought wrong. The trust Carla created had one purpose: to reclaim every cent that had been stolen, laundered, or misused. It had no name, no face, but it was legally airtight, and it was already doing its work. The next freeze came 4 days later, a property Melissa had co-signed with her ex-partner before he left. Turns out, he'd used some of my old assets to leverage the down payment. Assets still traceable to me. Carla filed a lien. The sale collapsed. I didn't need the house. I didn't want the money. I wanted the silence. I wanted the realization to set in that I hadn't just disappeared. I'd been watching, planning, waiting. Matt called next. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that started calm and ended frantic. Said they were losing everything, that I was being cruel, that this wasn't the man they remembered. He was right. I wasn't that man anymore. Because 5 years ago, they watched me break and looked away. Now they were watching me stand. And this time, I wasn't bending. This wasn't about revenge. This was about precision. And I wasn't finished. By the end of March, 3 more accounts were frozen. 1 in Melissa's name, 2 in trust accounts set up for future real estate ventures, all linked, indirectly, to assets that had once been mine, siphoned quietly during the months leading up to the divorce. She'd been confident, sloppy, careless with timing. Carla traced every penny, not aggressively, methodically, like a surgeon with a scalpel, not a hammer. The goal wasn't destruction. It was precision removal, quiet exposure. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not the warehouse crew. Not the shift manager who'd become my friend. Not even the retired vet I played chess with on Sundays. I just worked, filed, waited. Then came the letter. Not from Melissa. Not from her lawyer. It was from Rachel. A printed letter. Not typed. Handwritten. Carefully scripted. Like something she'd rehearsed for days. She said Melissa's condition had worsened. That doctors were unsure if she'd make it through summer. That Matt had moved back in to help. That everything was falling apart. She said they weren't asking for forgiveness. Just understanding. She said they were scared. She wrote, "You don't have to fix everything, Dad. But if there's anything left of the man who raised us, please call." I read it 3 times. And then I burned it. Because they didn't want understanding. They wanted erasure. A version of the past where betrayal was just a misunderstanding. Where abandonment could be rebranded as confusion. But I remembered everything. I remembered standing in a crowded room, humiliated. Remembered the silence of my children. Remembered Melissa looking me in the eye, handing over the divorce papers while guests clapped behind her. They wanted help now? Then they'd get it. Just not the kind they expected. I instructed Carla to begin a quiet audit of the family foundation Melissa had set up 2 years after our divorce. On paper, it was for education initiatives. In practice, it was a shell, a tax shelter funneling donor money into luxury expenses. My name wasn't on it, but the initial capital came from an account Melissa didn't have legal access to when she opened it. We had records, emails, transaction logs. Carla said, "We can blow this open." I said, "Not yet." Because I didn't want to fight. I wanted a choice. A single moment where they realized how far this had gone. Where they had to decide whether to come clean or watch everything collapse. So I made a final move. I sent Rachel a 1-line message. "Meet me. Alone. Sunday. 9 a.m. Griffith Lake Park." And I waited. Not for their apology. For their decision. Griffith Lake was empty that morning. Gray sky. Thin fog curling over the water. A bench I remembered from before, paint peeling, still sturdy. I sat. Waited. At exactly 9:03, Rachel's car pulled in. She stepped out slowly, cautiously. Her eyes scanned the lot, as if expecting someone else. I watched her hesitate, then walk toward me. She didn't sit right away. Just stood there, hugging herself against the wind. I nodded to the space beside me. She sat. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You've changed." I didn't respond. She looked at the lake. Her voice low, flat. She said Melissa was dying. That Matt was spiraling, drinking too much, fighting with creditors. That the house was in foreclosure and the insurance had lapsed. She said they didn't know where else to turn. Then she said the one thing I didn't expect. "We weren't protecting her. We were avoiding you. Because we were afraid you'd never forgive us. And we didn't want to face that." I watched a bird skim across the lake. Still didn't speak. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Plain. Unmarked. Passed it to me without a word. Inside, photocopies. Financial statements. Legal filings. A full confession of what Melissa had done during the divorce. What she'd taken. What she'd hidden. What she'd lied about. It was everything. Handwritten notes. Transaction trails. Even a signed statement from Melissa, dated 2 days earlier. Rachel said, "She wants you to have it. Do whatever you want." She said it's time. I closed the folder. I asked one question. Why now? Rachel looked older than her 32 years. Tired. Weathered. She said, "Because you disappeared. And we thought you were gone for good. But now we know. You were just quiet. Waiting. And we're not proud of how we handled any of it." Then she stood. Said she'd respect whatever I chose to do. And she left. I sat on that bench for an hour, holding that folder. Not because I needed proof. I already had enough. But because this was different. This wasn't strategy. This was surrender. They hadn't come for help anymore. They'd come for judgment. And now the decision was mine. I could destroy what was left. Push the final piece over the edge. Let the foundation collapse and walk away for good. Or I could do something else. Something quieter. That night, I called Carla. Told her to freeze all actions. Temporarily. Because before I moved again, I needed to see Melissa. One last time. Not for closure. For truth. The hospital was tucked behind a strip mall in Frederick. Low brick building, single entrance, the kind of place built for quiet exits. Rachel met me at the door. She didn't speak. Just nodded once and led me through the halls. Melissa's room was near the end. Private. Sterile. She looked smaller than I remembered. Pale. Hollowed out. Her hands rested on a thin blanket, fingers twitching in sleep. I stood at the doorway, watching. Rachel whispered, "She's on a lot of medication. Comes and goes." Then she left us alone. I pulled a chair to the far corner of the room and sat. I didn't move. Didn't speak. For almost 40 minutes, Melissa slept. Machines beeped softly. The air smelled like bleach and plastic. Then her eyes opened. She didn't flinch when she saw me. She just stared, and then said, "I wasn't supposed to fall apart." I said nothing. She turned her head slightly, grimacing from the effort. She said she'd planned it for a year. The party, the papers, the show. She'd thought it would make things clean. Fast. Sharp. She wanted a new life without the guilt of confrontation. She said the new man had promised her things. Security. Excitement. Youth. He left 3 months after I disappeared. She didn't ask where I'd gone. Didn't care. She assumed I'd retreat, vanish quietly. That I was too kind to retaliate. Then she saw what I'd built. The trust. The reclaiming. The silence. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. I said, that was the point. She asked if I hated her. I didn't answer. Because hate wasn't the word. It never was. What I felt was something deeper. Colder. Not rage. Not pain. Distance. She said she didn't expect forgiveness. That it was never about winning. That maybe she'd always resented the simplicity of my loyalty. Because it reminded her of everything she wasn't. Then she asked the real question. Are you going to finish what you started? I looked at the machines. The tubes. The slow rhythm of a body running out of time. And I told her the truth. You already finished it. I'm just cleaning up the mess. She nodded. Closed her eyes again. I left before Rachel returned. Back in the parking lot, I sat behind the wheel for a long time, hands still on the keys. Not shaking, not unsure, just quiet. Because I knew now what came next. And I knew exactly how it would end. 2 days after the hospital visit, I met Carla at a diner off Route 70. She ordered black coffee. No cream, no sugar. Same as me. She slid a folder across the table. Inside, final drafts. Settlement options. Transfer protocols. Quiet resolutions. She said, "You want to finish this clean or leave a scar?" I told her, clean. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. That moment passed in the hospital room. This was about extraction. Removing myself from everything that had been rotting for years. Not to hurt them, just to be done. Permanently. We drew up a deal. Unorthodox, but legal. The trust would transfer partial assets back into the original accounts. Just enough to keep the creditors off Matt and Rachel's back. Medical expenses would be paid in full through a private grant Carla helped structure, with no names attached. The foundation would dissolve. Quietly. No public scandal. No audit. In return, Melissa's legal team would sign a non-interference agreement. No more contact. No more claims. Rachel and Matt would receive nothing beyond immediate debt coverage. No inheritance. No second chances. Final. I signed. Carla sent the papers that afternoon. By evening, I'd shut down the last burner account and closed the holding company I'd operated under for 5 years. I transferred the remainder of my funds into a single secure account under my original name, Richard Callahan, because the game was over, and I was stepping off the board. Melissa passed a week later. Rachel sent a short email. No flowery language. Just facts. She said it was peaceful. Said Matt handled the arrangements. Said thank you for everything I did and didn't do. I didn't reply. That weekend, I packed what little I owned into the back of my truck. Gave my notice at the warehouse. Left my keys on the hook. No farewell speeches. No goodbyes. Just gone. Again. But this time, it wasn't escape. It was release. I drove northwest. Long stretches of road. No destination. Just space. Somewhere past Spokane, I stopped at a small cabin near the edge of a forest. It was run down. Cheap. Forgotten. Perfect. I paid 6 months' rent in cash. Changed the locks. Set up a single cot, a small desk, a safe for documents. No internet. No phone. Silence. Real silence. For the first time in years, there was no plan. No strategy. No list of things to undo. Just time. To sit. To rebuild. To exist, without anyone watching, needing, or betraying. They could keep the story they told themselves. That I vanished, reappeared, helped, and forgave. But the truth? The truth stayed with me. Buried deep. Unspoken. Stillness wasn't weakness. It was the last power I had. Spring came slow to the mountains. Snow receded in patches, like a secret being uncovered one frostbitten piece at a time. The silence out here was different, not empty, just uninterested. Nature didn't care who I used to be, or what I'd done. I chopped wood, fixed the broken window, cooked simple meals. Some nights, I didn't speak a single word aloud. It felt right. Then, in early April, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. It was from Matt. He said he didn't expect a response. Just needed to say things. That Melissa had asked him to make things right, whatever that meant. He said he knew it was too late to rebuild, but maybe not too late to learn. He wrote, "You didn't disappear. You just stopped speaking. And we never knew how loud that silence would get." I read the letter once, then folded it and slid it into a drawer. I didn't need validation. I'd already let go. But what struck me was the timing. Because just a week before, I'd started something I hadn't planned to. I began writing again. Not letters. Not messages. Just pages. Memories. Quiet fragments of the man I used to be. Not the engineer. Not the husband. Just the human being beneath all that structure. Not for anyone else. Just me. I kept them in a box by the cot. Labeled simply, before. Because whatever came next wouldn't be built on those foundations. Sometimes I wondered what Rachel told people now. About me. About what happened. About how her father vanished, reappeared, and walked away again. Sometimes I wondered if they still looked over their shoulders, waiting for the next silence to hit them. But most of the time, I didn't wonder at all. One morning, I saw a moose near the creek. Big, slow-moving. It didn't startle when it saw me. Just looked, acknowledged, then moved on. And I thought, that's it. That's the life I wanted now. Quiet, self-contained, unbothered. People often think silence is surrender, but it isn't. Sometimes silence is the last sharp edge. The one you don't see coming because it makes no sound at all. I hadn't shouted, hadn't raged, hadn't begged. And still, I changed everything. Not just for them, for me. Because there's a kind of power that doesn't come from revenge or noise or recognition. It comes from walking away and never once needing to look back. It's been 11 months since the settlement. The cabin's roof leaks when it rains. The stove runs hot. The plumbing is unreliable. But none of that bothers me. I built something here. Not with hammers or nails, but with absence. With limits. With the discipline of leaving things unsaid. Sometimes, I drive into the nearest town for supplies. No one knows my name. They just call me sir and thank me for exact change. That's the life I earned. Not the one I lost. Melissa's obituary ran quiet. No fanfare. No service. Just a paragraph in the local paper. Mother, former paralegal, survived by 2 adult children. My name wasn't mentioned. Rachel never wrote again. Matt sent one more letter, months ago. He said he was sober now, working construction. He thanked me for not destroying what little we had left. But he also said he understood why I didn't come back. He wrote, "Sometimes the loudest love is the one that walks away." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. I walk the woods now. Chop wood. Watch the seasons shift. Measure time not in hours but in changes. The thaw in the creek, the bloom in the trees, the way silence deepens when the snow falls. I don't regret what I did. Not the vanishing. Not the return. Not the cold precision of how I took everything back, without raising my voice, without stepping out of line, without leaving fingerprints. Because that was never the goal. I didn't want to punish them. I wanted to remind them who I was. Not the man in the cardigan at his retirement party. Not the name they erased from the bank accounts. Not the hollow figure they watched walk away in silence. But the man who never needed to scream to be heard. The man who built systems meant to last. The man they thought was gone, but had simply changed frequencies. I'm not waiting for reconciliation. Not hoping for redemption. This story doesn't end with hugs or holiday dinners. It ends exactly where it needs to. In the mountains. At peace. Alone, but not lonely. Because the life I live now is mine. Every inch of it. Paid for in full. With patience. With silence. With resolve. And sometimes, late at night, when the fire's burning low and the wind rattles the window frames, I sit at my desk. Open that box labeled before. And remind myself. Some storms don't come with thunder. Some revolutions don't make noise. And some men don't need revenge. They just need the world to realize what it lost when it stopped listening. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.